The following stories are about 3 not guilty verdicts that shocked the whole world. We've got a young woman whom everyone believed killed her own toddler, only to be found not guilty. An infamous American football player found not guilty in the murder of his wife, and another man in a very controversial case of an African American teenager killed at the hands of a Hispanic man.
911, what's your emergency?
I called a little bit ago. The deputy sheriff saying that I found out my granddaughter has been taken.
A search for a missing girl became an investigation into a tragic death.
We found a human skull.
Skeletal remains are those of the missing toddler, Kaylee Anthony.
Her mother, Casey Anthony, was charged with her murder.
They couldn't find a single link from Casey to Kaylee's death.
There is no child that should have duct tape on its face when it died.
Then came a verdict that outraged the nation.
We, the jury, find the defendant not guilty.
The case against Casey Anthony is undoubtedly one of the most infamous, controversial, and highly talked about trials in recent history of the United States. It was a horrific story of a young life lost that seemed to conclude without any real justice. Let's take a look back. Marcia Clark, the same attorney that prosecuted O.J. Simpson, decided that it was time to re-examine this case. After all, there are still so many questions left unanswered.
To me, though, the Casey Anthony case presents a real question as to what really happened. I want to know who's responsible for Kaylee's death. I want justice for Kaylee. But I also want to know the truth.
On July 15th of 2008, Cindy Anthony, the mother of Casey Anthony, made a phone call to 911. She said she hadn't seen her granddaughter in 31 days, and that when she opened the trunk of Casey's car, she smelt what she believed to be the odor of a dead body.
I found out my granddaughter has been taken. She has been missing for a month. We're talking about a 3-year-old little girl. My daughter finally admitted that the baby's in the store. I need to find her. She just admitted to me that she's been trying to find her herself. There's something wrong. I found my daughter's car today, and it smells like there's been a body in the damn car.
What sort of mother comes to believe that her daughter is missing, but waits an entire month to call the authorities? This is what Casey Anthony did. Why? Because she was going to find the answers herself.
At 4:41 a.m., after her initial interview at the house, Casey takes the detectives to 3 locations where she says the nanny may be with Kaylee.
Casey took the detectives to different locations where she believed Kaylee's alleged nanny could have taken her. One of the places was vacant, and the others proved to be unsuccessful.
I mean, at this point, I'm going to be wondering, what is she doing? She's had this lack of emotion. Now she's led us on this wild goose chase. What's next?
While police looked into the possibility nanny theory, others looked into Casey's supposed job, which was at Universal Orlando. As it would turn out, she had been fired 2 years prior and had failed to tell her family this. What police noticed, beyond the fact that Casey had lied about her employment, was her demeanor.
So she's not stressed, she's relaxed.
Absolutely. Casey begins waving at people who are busy at their desks working, and these people are waving back, and you can kind of tell they're confused about why we're there. And so finally we turn down a hallway and it's a dead end. And at this point, Casey looks at us and says, I don't really work here.
Police are beginning to become more and more suspicious of Casey and think that she could have hidden Kaylee somewhere. They know her whole story of Zanny the nanny, the person she claimed took the child, is made up. The whole community is worried about Kaylee's whereabouts, and the pressure is rising.
Everybody else seemed worried about that child.
Except for Casey.
The child's mother.
Police interview a man named Tony, who Casey was dating at the time.
He told us he was going to leave, and he was trying to let Casey down easy by saying, I would never marry a woman who has a daughter.
Because of Casey's made-up story and seemingly no idea where her daughter could be, she was arrested for child neglect and for lying to a police officer. This is her mugshot.
Now that Casey Anthony has been arrested, the detectives get to work. After getting a search warrant, They searched the inside and outside of the Anthony residence for any clues to Kaylee's whereabouts. And they discover a crucial piece of evidence: Casey's car.
When police get access to the car, they smelled what appeared to be human decomposition. They decided to have the car towed to a forensic unit, where those officials also recognized the strong smell that George, Casey's dad, would also recall.
That particular smell, whenever you smell it, it's something you never forget.
Nothing else that could have been.
The fact that 2 CSI experts were convinced there was human decomposition in Casey's car is pretty solid evidence. But there was an even more reliable source that seemed to confirm the presence of death as well.
Cadaver dogs hit on the trunk, the car, and so obviously that's where we focused our search.
So police now know what car was likely used to transport the body, if in fact Kaylee was killed. But they still didn't have the body itself and were searching the area. Meanwhile, Casey is still refusing to tell the police the truth, and they're getting pretty fed up about it. They know that all the stories she's been telling are lies.
So where we are right now is in a position that doesn't look very good for you. Because obviously I know, and you know, that everything you told me is a lie, correct?
Not everything that I told you.
Pretty much everything that you've told me, including where Kaylee is right now.
That I don't know where she is.
Sure you do. And here's,
absolutely
listen,
do not know where she is.
Let me explain something. Looking at you, I know that everything that you've told me is a lie. I am very confident, just by having talked to you the short period of time, that you know where she is.
I legitimately have not seen my daughter in 5 weeks. I didn't let anything happen to her, except I trusted her with somebody that had been taking care of her, that had been taking good care of her. Someone that she was comfortable with, that I was comfortable with.
It seems that Casey is going to hold on to her story that Kaylee's nanny ran off with the child, even though she is not able to prove that this nanny even ever existed. They then try to look for some sign of motherly concern with Casey and try to see if this would be enough to try to get her to start telling the truth.
Well, then if the main thing you want to do is find your daughter, and you don't think lying to us is going to help us find her, why would you do that?
Because I'm scared, and I know I'm running out of options. It's been a month.
What are you scared of?
I'm scared of not seeing my daughter ever again.
Casey's parents, Cindy and George, seem to be far more worried about finding Kaylee than the child's mother. They're putting up signs and leading search efforts, all the while in clear, deep emotional pain. 9 days after Casey was put into protective custody, they had a chance to speak to her. Up until this point, they had only been able to see court footage of her. In the recording of this visit, Casey seems to be completely relaxed and even giggles at some points.
Sweetie, we've been watching you for so long.
You haven't?
I love you.
I love you too. Hi.
We've been seeing you sitting down. We forgive anything that you've said.
Oh,
Or that you don't realize the whole United States is looking for our Kaylee.
I know that, Mom.
Her cover's going to be on People magazine in a few days.
Okay.
As the police work to find any possible clues as to Kaylee's whereabouts, they take away some items, including her clothes and then a computer. At this point in the investigation, they are becoming more and more convinced that Casey may have murdered her own daughter. But why?
If Casey's responsible for her daughter's disappearance, what possible motive would she have? To find out, police decided to focus in on what Casey was doing during the 31 days after Kaylee was last seen and before Casey was arrested. What kind of life was she living? Was this the kind of life she wanted without her daughter? Could wanting this life be her motive?
June 6, 2008 was the day that Kaylee was last seen by her grandparents.
I remember Kaylee coming out from Casey's room, and I said, "Where you going?" And she says, "Going with Mommy."
Casey had told her parents that she and her daughter were going to spend the night with Kaylee's nanny. But that same night, Casey and her boyfriend were seen leaving a video store with Kaylee nowhere in sight. Casey was pictured in other snapshots around that time, partying. She even got a tattoo around that time that said Bella Vita, which means beautiful life. 18 days after Cindy last saw her granddaughter, she drove to Orlando Studios, where Casey had been saying she was working. She called her daughter and told her that she wanted to pick up Kaylee, but Casey said that they would be in Jacksonville for a while. Cindy is starting to get worried.
Casey was on the floor crying.
And I overheard her tell me that Kaylee had been gone for 31 days and that Sandy had taken her. I swore at her and hit the bed and ran out and called the police again.
The more police look at the life Casey was living when her daughter was supposedly missing, the more they see a potential motive. Casey wanted a carefree life of partying and having fun.
Casey's partying and walking around, hugging on her boyfriend through Blockbuster videos, smiling and laughing.
The most common reasons for filicide, which is a mother her child, is killing the child in order to pave the way for an idealized life.
The fact that Casey may have been trying to save a relationship with a man who did not want children could also have played a role in a possible motive.
Well, she has tremendous resentment towards Kaylee. Kaylee stood in the way of love, and now Kaylee's landed her in jail. It's all Kaylee's fault.
4 months after the search for Kaylee began, there had been no body found and the child was presumed dead. Casey was charged with first-degree murder, which he pled not guilty to. It wasn't until December 11th that something devastating was discovered.
I'm here to inform you that the skeletal remains found on December 11th are those of the missing toddler, Kaylee Anthony.
Kaylee was found in the forest in a plastic bag in the woods. Animals had gotten to her body and not all of her bones were in place. A Winnie the Pooh blanket was found near the scene. This was the bag she was found in. Duct tape was also found in the area, and it is believed it was placed over Kaylee's nose and mouth. Casey's defense team began to build a story of what could have happened and how this could have been a mistake.
In the opening statement, as I recall, was that Kaylee Anthony climbed up the ladder that was left out, drowned in the family pool, that George Anthony found her, confronted Casey.
What happened next is, as soon as Casey came around this corner, she saw George Anthony holding Kaylee in his arms. She immediately grabbed Kaylee and began to cry. And shortly thereafter, George began to yell at her. "Look what you've done! Your mother will never forgive you, and you will go to jail for child neglect for the rest of your freaking life."
And he then left with the body.
But George denied having anything at all to do with Kaylee's disappearance and death. The defense also claimed that everyone knew how much Casey loved her daughter and that she wouldn't have had the heart to do something like this to Kaylee. But if not her, then who did this?
Do you have an opinion as to the manner of death in this case?
Yes.
What is that opinion?
Homicide.
This is the same conclusion of Marcia Clark.
I've determined that the first 48 hours of this case produced a prime suspect, Casey Anthony. Her behavior while Kaylee was missing revealed a potential motive. The suspect's car became a crucial piece of evidence that some experts agree possibly contained a dead body for a short period of time. The experts I've spoken with believe that the duct tape was placed on Kaylee's face, which to me proves this may have been a homicide, not an accidental death.
Casey's trial was incredibly intense and emotional, and was followed by people across the nation. The defense brought up allegations against George Anthony claiming that he sexually abused Casey when she was young. He denied these allegations. Perhaps one of the most emotional parts of the trial was when George took the stand and discussed the impact this all had on his mental health.
You learned in December of 2008 that the remains of your granddaughter were found. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What effect did that have on you when you learned that Kaylee's remains had been found?
A deep hurt inside. Tears. The whole gamut of just an emotional loss, a breakdown inside of me, and seeing what my wife and my son went through.
Up to that moment, had you held out the hope that Kaylee would be found alive?
Absolutely. Every day from July 15th
until the day we were told it was Kaylee.
At this point, even Casey's own parents suspected her. But at the end of the day, it would come down to the jury to decide if Casey was guilty or not. If she was likely to be spending the rest of her life in jail for Kaylee's murder. The expected verdict was guilty. At least that's what most people around the world expected. The decision was announced on July 5th of 2011. Just about everyone was tuning in to watch.
In the Circuit Court for the 9th Judicial Circuit in and for Orange County, Florida, the State of Florida versus Casey Marie Anthony. As to case number 2008 CF 15606-0. As to the charge of first-degree murder, verdict as to count 1, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all, stated at Orlando, Orange County, Florida, on this 5th day of July, 2011, signed foreperson.
Casey's face went from stoic to blinking back tears as the decision was read.
As to the charge of aggravated child abuse, verdict as to count 2, we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty, so say we all.
Casey was also found not guilty of manslaughter. The only charge she was found guilty of was providing false information to the police. Following the verdict reading, Casey was comforted by her team of smiling lawyers. Meanwhile, the nation was left shocked by this unexpected outcome. Casey was given a credit for time served in prison and was released on July 17th. She exited the jail wearing a pink shirt and jeans while surrounded by a team of bodyguards. Getting her out of prison safely was quite the operation, considering how many people hated her.
It really was an extraordinary and perhaps to many people infuriating scene early this morning. Let's bring up that video once again. At exactly 12:14 a.m., after 1,054 days in jail, Casey Anthony, who has been called the most hated woman in America, walked free.
People were enraged.
On TV, it's different, but when you're here, it's real. And it's not fair. It's really not right.
Casey went on to stay out of the media, for the most part, up until 2022 when she was featured in a Peacock documentary series. During this series, she attempted to clear her name and tell the world her version of events.
For the first time on camera, Casey Anthony, the woman infamously accused and later acquitted of murdering her own daughter, Kaylee.
As to the charge of first-degree murder, not guilty.
Casey's never told her story.
Is now addressing lingering questions more than a decade after that not guilty decision.
The only person in this world that matters to me still is my daughter. But I'm still defending the fact that I didn't hurt her.
She blamed her father for Kaylee's death, saying that he staged the girl's drowning and did not try to resuscitate her. The docuseries has been considered widely controversial, as many still believe that Casey is to blame. If you thought this case was controversial, the next one is sure to shock you as well. O.J. Simpson, nicknamed Juice, is a former NFL player and celebrity. He is also the focus of one of the most famous and controversial trials the United States has ever seen. His career was thriving when he met Nicole Brown, the woman that would become his future wife. He began dating her in 1977 despite the fact that he was married and had children with another woman. He was known for having a temper and lashing out, and yet this seemed to be overshadowed by his celebrity status.
She knew he had a volatile temper, but Nicole Brown married OJ anyway, hoping that he would mellow once they started a family.
Nicole and OJ had 2 children, Sydney and Justin, and for a while things were great, as OJ even said himself.
About this a lot. She was almost too attentive, if you can be too attentive.
But as the years went by, the couple began having problems. They would get into arguments, and at times things would get violent. As was the case in 1989, when one particular fight resulted in Nicole getting bruised and scratched up.
This time, OJ would be charged with spousal abuse and sentenced to 120 hours of community service.
Nicole ultimately filed for divorce from OJ on February 25th of 1992. But even though the couple were no longer together, that doesn't mean that the fight stopped. At times, OJ would come over to the house, find that Nicole had someone over, and go into a rage.
Nicole had come out, and we started having words about who is this guy, why is he here, what's going on.
And she says, "This is my house, get the F out of here."
Yes.
It was clear that Nicole was terrified not only for her own life, but for the safety of her 2 young children. The fear was evident in her voice during a 911 call in 1993, when OJ came over to the house and was clearly very angry. He could be heard yelling in the background.
Can you get someone over here now to 325 Gretna Green? He's back. Please.
Okay, what does he look like?
He's O.J. Simpson. I think you know his record. Could you just send somebody over here?
Okay, what is he doing there?
He just drove up again.
He just drove up.
Over.
Okay, wait a minute. What kind of car is he in?
He's in a white Bronco, but first of all, he broke the back door down to get in.
Okay, wait a minute. What's your name?
Nicole Simpson.
Okay, is he the sportscaster or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
Wait a minute. We're sending the police. What is he doing? Is he threatening you?
I'm going nuts.
Okay, has he threatened you in any way, or is he just harassing you?
You're going to hear him in a minute. He's about to come in again.
Okay, just stay on the line.
I don't want to stay on the line. He's going to beat the shit out of me.
It was just 1 year later, on June 12th of 1994, that Nicole Brown and another man, Ron Goldman, were found to death outside of her California home. The scene was horrific. Of course, due to past incidents, O.J. Simpson was immediately the #1 suspect in connection with the crime, and he was ordered to turn himself into police headquarters, but he failed to show. What followed after was a bizarre car chase that played out on television as the rest of the world watched.
He assured us and agreed to provide for the surrender, and that's not occurred.
On June 17, 1994, O.J. Simpson became the most famous fugitive on the planet.
Everybody was on the alert looking for a wanted double homicide suspect who happened to be a Heisman Trophy winner.
O.J. Simpson fled as a passenger in his white Ford Bronco that was being driven by his teammate, Al Cowlings. As Al drove, O.J. was sitting in the back, threatening to shoot himself. It didn't take long for other drivers to recognize O.J. and his car and report him to the police. Al contacted the police and informed them of the very serious situation. After O.J. arrived at his home, he was taken into custody. He later pled not guilty to the murders of Nicole and Ron. The case would be heading to what would become one of the most infamous trials of all time. He was represented by a team of hotshot lawyers, including Robert Kardashian, Johnny Cochran, and Robert Shapiro, to name a few. The case was incredibly highly publicized and divided the nation. It featured infamous moments, including the infamous glove scene in the courtroom, in which O.J. attempted to put on gloves found at the crime scene for the jury. The gloves appeared, at least as how O.J. was wearing them, not to fit. This led to an infamous phrase later used in the courtroom.
If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
The gloves were just one example of the evidence presented before the jury by O.J.'s defense team. The jury in this case is one of the aspects that makes it record-breaking. These individuals were actually sequestered for an incredible 265 days, the longest in American history. At the end of the day, it was up to them to decide whether O.J. was guilty or not. When the decision was finally made, millions stood by to hear the verdict.
Superior Court of California, County of Los Angeles, in the matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA097211. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder in violation of Penal Code Section 187A, a felony upon Nicole Brown Simpson.
O.J. was found not guilty, not only in Nicole's death, but in Ron Goldman's as well. This verdict was devastating for not only the victims' families, but for all who believed that O.J. was truly guilty. While he went free, he was later arrested for a separate robbery and kidnapping charge that landed him in prison until October of 2017. As of now, he remains a free man. In a bizarre interview from 2018, O.J. Simpson was asked what he believed could have happened the night Nicole and Ron were murdered. He provided what has been referred to as a hypothetical confession.
I remember I grabbed a knife. I do remember that portion, taking a knife from Charlie. And to be honest, after that, I don't remember. Except I'm standing there and there's all kind of stuff around and,
What kind of stuff?
And stuff around. I hate to say this, but this is hypothetical. I'm sorry. Right. I know we got to back up again.
It's okay.
It is a story that no one can stop talking about, the shooting of Trayvon Martin. It seems like every day we learn about a new piece of the puzzle, and every day the outrage only seems to grow.
Trayvon Martin was a 17-year-old African American student from Florida who was killed on February 26th of 2012 after being shot by a 28-year-old Hispanic American named George Zimmerman. This led to an extremely controversial court case. February 26th of 2012 was a rainy night in Sanford, Florida. Trayvon had come into the area to visit his father's fiancée at her home. At one point during the night, he decided to walk on foot to a local convenience store before heading back home. At the store, he got some Skittles and an Arizona watermelon tea for snacks. His plan was to head back and play video games. But while on his way back, he was spotted by George Zimmerman, who is a member of the neighborhood watch. George called 911 and reported Trayvon as a suspicious person.
Hey, we've had some break-ins in my neighborhood, and there's a real suspicious guy. The best address I can give you. This guy looks like he's up to no good, or he's on drugs or something. It's raining, and he's just walking around looking about. Okay, and this guy, is he white, black, or Hispanic? He looks black. Did you see what he was wearing? Yeah, a dark hoodie, like a gray hoodie, and either jeans or sweatpants and white tennis shoes. He's sitting around, he was just staring.
George ended up following Trayvon even though the 911 dispatcher had told him not to.
Are you following him? Yeah. Okay, we don't need you to do that.
When the teenager realized he was being followed, he began to run away, and a violent confrontation occurred between the two. The confrontation ended with Trayvon having been shot to death. George was arrested and charged with the teen's murder, to which he pleaded not guilty. He claimed that he only acted in self-defense. This led to mass outrage, petitions, and further discussions regarding racism. But it was the verdict, perhaps, that was the most shocking part of this case.
Members of the jury, have you reached a verdict? If you'll please fold the verdict form and hand it to Deputy Jarvis. Okay, if you'll please publish the verdict.
In the Circuit Court of the 18th Judicial Circuit in and for Seminole County, Florida, State of Florida versus George Zimmerman. Verdict: we, the jury, find George Zimmerman not guilty. So say we all four-person.
Many people were enraged to hear of George's acquittal. They truly believed that his actions were inexcusable.
Heartbroken for Trayvon parents. Me as a parent, as a grandmother, got young grandsons coming up in society. This shouldn't have happened. If he would have obeyed the non-emergency people, this child would still be alive.
It's sad. It's sad that we live in a place called United States of America where they always glamorize it. This is the place to come, not for African American.
Following the not guilty verdict, George ended up suing Trayvon's family.
There is growing outrage tonight over a new lawsuit filed by George Zimmerman, the man who shot and killed unarmed teenager Trayvon Martin, but was acquitted. Zimmerman is now suing Trayvon Martin's family and others for $100 million. What does he claim? And the family tonight saying he is victimizing them again.
In February of 2022, this lawsuit was thrown out by a judge. And so there we have it. 3 not guilty verdicts that shocked the world, and many are still talked about today. All 3 of these individuals are currently walking free and enjoying their lives. Do they deserve to be, or should they have gotten life in prison, as many were asking for years ago? Let us know what you think in the comments.